Today I am finally starting a Godzilla Grand Prix, where 3 Fridays in a row I am doing 3 different Godzilla-based videos, starting us off with Godzilla monsters turned into demons. All in honor of the new Godzilla Kong movie coming out next week, which I am super excited about, and I'm sure many of you are as well. So let's get into today's video, shall we? Let's go! Spun too much.
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
Demons do not exist in every realm, but in some, where enough of them have been created by a powerful and malevolent being, where the energy of demonic presence lingers in the atmosphere, at some points, during times of great enough collective fear, new demons can appear essentially from thin air. These rare occurrences create true forces of nature. Their stature may not make them appear far more dangerous than other demons. They don't even grow as tall as some of the demons under the order of the former dinosaur demon general Sauriecklus, but their limited scale does not equate to limited power. These demons are referred to as titanically, and the most famous case of one emerging was in Japan, not long after the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II. The immense pain and terror caused to the people of Japan was enough to spur the creation of an immensely powerful demon called Automala Goji. This monstrosity was a malicious 11-foot-tall lizard demon who sought out those most racked with fear over the possibility of another nuclear attack. Its footsteps would cause explosive sounds on par with the atom bomb, but only to be heard by the beast's target, making any they tell think them to be insane. Then, after days of circling with its explosive footsteps, it would approach its target closer, allowing itself to be seen in fleeting glimpses, and causing shockwaves that would crack the ground and walls and structures around the target. But again, only to be seen by them. Finally, it would reveal itself in full view, causing more explosive sounds, shockwaves, and even swells of heat that would appear to melt and burn away everything surrounding the victim, leaving them in just a plume of ash and dust. Just them and Automala Goji. It would then suck the life force right out of their bodies in a beam of blue light, leaving their form unable to be sustained as a vessel for their soul. The deaths caused by this demon were many, but were simply attributed to mental breakdowns in victims who'd lost loved ones to the atomic bombs. That is until a scientist and inventor named Dr. Daisuke Serizawa caught wind of what was happening, and he had another theory. Despite being a very scientifically minded man, he had been researching demonic events on the side for some time, and knew if they were real, then fear was their main lure. His fiancée Emiko was working at a hospital treating survivors of the bombings, and as a result had developed immense fear around the events repeating. She was starting to hear the explosive footsteps and claimed to be seeing a monster looming near her around every dark corner. Dr. Serizawa suspected a demon may be coming for her, so he came up with a plan. He had been developing a weapon for the Japanese military to use themselves, but suspected that what he was creating could be too powerful for military hands. He called it the Oxygen Destroyer. It would cause oxygen molecules to split then liquefy, disintegrating any living thing that was within its radius. After seeing the destructive power of the atom bomb, he had no interest in providing any military with another incredibly horrific weapon, but maybe for the problem he was facing, he could utilize it himself. Dr. Serizawa took Emiko out onto a small fishing boat into the middle of a lake and asked her to say as soon as she started seeing this demon again. Soon enough, she cried out that it was approaching in the water, with its dorsal fins cutting a wake towards them. Dr. Serizawa set the boat at full speed away from it, then moved to the back of the boat, with a mini version of the Oxygen Destroyer prepared. He intended to activate it then hurl it at the beast. But that was hard to do when he couldn't actually see it. Emiko was in a panic seeing the creature getting closer and closer, but Serizawa was looking in every direction for any sign of it. She knew he couldn't be the one to do this. She ignored her terror, marched up to him, and snatched the device away. The creature swooped up its head right to the back of the boat, starting it burning and melting. It spread its mouth wide as if it was about to chomp into the vessel, and Emiko pushed the button and shoved the device right into its mouth. She and her fiancé both ran for the front of the boat as the creature slipped ever so slightly back from the retreating vessel. A few seconds later, the waters were rocked with a massive explosion. The two huddled together at the front of the boat, unsure if they'd gotten far enough away to survive. Wood erupted off the back of their vessel and it began to sink. But they had survived, and the demon was nowhere to be seen. Another boat soon came for them, drawn in by the explosion, and the demon did not return for them. But not because it was truly dead, simply because by the time it recovered in a new, molten form, it had another target in its sights, one that was now a higher priority for it to seek out. It took years for Automala to fully recover from the explosion of the oxygen destroyer, and by the time it had, another Titaemon had emerged, this one most likely made from the mass fear and hysteria in the United States during the Cold War. Many citizens were in constant fear and paranoia that any of their neighbors could be a secret communist invader from Russia, and as a result, the demon Ghidorah was born. Interesting though, this Titaemon's tactics were not to invade the homes or communities of those in fear, instead to invade the demon ecosystem. It didn't hunt humans, it hunted other demon generals. You see, demon generals are demons powerful enough to make demonic minions to do their bidding. They then don't have to hunt and torment fearful humans themselves, as they absorb the fear created and consumed by their minions. As a result, Ghidorah seemed to realize that it could slay and absorb other demon generals, then taking over as the master of that general's minions and forever have its hunger sated. On top of that, it seemed to think that other Titaemons might take on this same tactic, so it began hunting other powerful demons such as itself, either forcing them to do its bidding and track down demon generals for it, or simply killing them. It was essentially attempting to become the alpha demon. This demon was not lacking in the might to achieve these goals either. Despite its narrow, wiry frame, it had the ability to conduct and project explosive bursts of golden lightning, which it could also inject into another beast or being's body through a bite from one of its 3 heads. It could also rapidly recover from any injury in a swell of electricity, and it only became more powerful and able to rapidly recover even more with every general it slayed. When Automala Goji fully healed, it seemed to sense Ghidorah's growing strength and take it as a challenge to its own might. Luckily, a group called the Predator Coalition of Demon Hunters were able to track this whole event to learn how even demons quarreled with their own kind. Dr. Serizawa had obsessively continued his research into demons, with his now wife Emiko assisting him. Thinking his weapon had killed Automala Goji, he sought out others looking to hunt demons, and eventually was able to get in contact with a man named Maxwell Tennyson, who'd helped start the coalition in the United States, which secretly defended the world from demons. They intended to study the oxygen destroyer's effect on other demons, but ceased this research when it was discovered that Automala had managed to fully recover. Though this did just make Serizawa even more invested in seeing what Automala was up to now. The coalition had already been doing their best to track Ghidorah's actions, and soon enough saw Automala appear in its path. Automala Goji promptly attacked and came far closer to killing Ghidorah than any other general or Titaemon had, burning off one of its heads and both of its tails with its radioactive molten breath. But even that Ghidorah was able to recover from. Had Automala found Ghidorah sooner, perhaps it could have won this fight, but having absorbed 3 demon generals to that point, Ghidorah was far too powerful and brought Automala to the brink of being slain next. But Emiko told the coalition that they had to intervene. They had to save Automala. Dr. Serizawa could see where she was going with this, that if Ghidorah continued to grow in strength, it could become completely unstoppable, with no person or demon able to kill it. If Automala had just gotten the closest any demon had to killing Ghidorah, then they needed to give Goji a second chance. And luckily, Serizawa and Emiko knew a way they could do just that. The Predator Coalition reluctantly agreed to Serizawa and Emiko's plan, and sent in a dozen hunters to ward off Ghidorah, while others strapped cables to Automala and dragged its body out of the fight with a truck. It was in the demon equivalent of a comatose state, with its body very slowly recovering. far too slowly for the Coalition to wait. Many simply wanted to slice it to pieces with demon-effective weapons, but Serizawa convinced them this creature was needed. They got it onto a ship and carted it off to a place Serizawa had discovered in his studies of demons called Infant Island. There resided a native population that worshipped a being that he was quite certain was a demon, possibly even a Titaemon. The locals had an agreement with the creature that it could choose 4 victims per year to torment and consume, but in exchange it would use its abilities of healing to save any residents of the island who became sick or injured. It was very unusual behavior for a demon, but Serizawa had a hunch that if it could heal humans, then perhaps it could heal other demons as well. Upon simply approaching the island with Automala on their vessel, they were halted in their path by a ravenous-looking humanoid moth demon, Mothindres. Serizawa spoke to the beast, explaining that they needed it to heal Automala. That if it didn't, Ghidorah would likely come for Mothindres eventually as well, so it was in the demon's own best interest to help them. The demon chuckled and retorted that it cared not for the events that occurred off its island, that if they wanted it to heal Automala, then they needed to offer something in exchange. To the surprise of the rest of the Coalition members, Serizawa offered himself. They tried to stop him, but he claimed there was no time to argue. If Ghidorah got to another demon general and killed and absorbed it, it could become too much for even Automala to kill. It was a valid point and everyone acknowledged that, but Emiko would not let him do this alone. She offered herself as well to make the deal even more appealing. Plus, she was convinced that she and Serizawa had both overcome enough of their fears that eventually this demon would decide it didn't even have interest in consuming them anyhow. And so, a deal was struck. The demon agreed to heal Automala and even accompany it into battle to heal it further. Serizawa and Emiko were left on the island, and the hunters and demons set off. Mothindres waited to heal Automala until they were close enough to Ghidorah, though they wouldn't have to wait long for that. Likely sensing that 2 Titaemons were in close proximity, Ghidorah was quickly drawn to the ship. With its sparking body soaring down towards them, Mothindres finally healed Automala, simply by stabbing its stinger right into the comatose demon's molten chest. It instantly rose with a shriek that sent ripples through the water. Ghidorah had an airborne advantage over Automala, but it seemed Mothindres finally grasped the extent of this demon's growing power and decided to help further in the fight. It flew circles around Ghidorah and kept it from staying too far from the ship, so Automala could get shots in at it, and even the demon hunters could get some swings in as well with their own weaponry. Soon, things were starting to look dire for the invasive 3-headed demon. That is until an unexpected third party appeared on the scene. The boat was suddenly rocked as a 13-foot-tall crimson crab demon clambered its way on board, to make the fight a little more difficult. The origins of the crab demon Destroyah that crawled up into this brawl are still debated by the Coalition. What was known is that the energy beams it could shoot from any of its mouths were near identical in effect to Serizawa's oxygen destroyer weapon originally used against Automala, leading some to suspect that this demon had grown into being from fragments of Automala's body after Serizawa had first destroyed it. With these beams, it was able to disintegrate one of Goji's arms within seconds of having clambered onto the ship. Automala retorted with a burning atomic blast, but this simply split the new demon into 2 separate creatures, and it continued its assault, before eventually reforming into one beast. It also seemed evident that it was not there as an ally to anyone. It targeted Automala, Mothindres, and Ghidorah. But as it saw Mothindres soar down and heal Automala, it then focused all of its firepower on the moth demon. It pierced one of its energy beams right through the creature's wings, sending it tumbling into the ocean. Then, it leapt in after it and tore the demon to shreds with its claws, ending Mothindres' reign of Infant Island. Automala used this time with the crab demon gone to bite and tear off all 3 of Ghidorah's heads, then devour them before scorching its entire body with magma, making every last fleck wither away into ash. The Coalition then didn't know what to do. They were no longer certain they had any reason to help Automala, but also knew little about this new threat. The crab demon had slain Mothindres but was now back up on their ship, and they wanted both it and Atama Legoji dead. They decided to start with the new threat, and hunters on the ship attacked the Crimson Crab, but even their most revered demon-slaying weaponry did next to nothing to it. That is, until Atamala breathed another beam of its molten breath and caused the creature to split again. One of the hunters then slashed a katana, passed down by his deceased father, through the crab's shell, and the blade did manage to make Destroyah shriek in pain. They then had a working theory. All the hunters did their best to keep the two parts of the demon away from each other, and soon, Atamala managed to split one of the halves into another two smaller crabs, that were even more affected by the hunter weaponry. It even seemed as though Atamala was up on this plan, and continued to focus on splitting the biggest parts of the demon into smaller and smaller sizes. Soon they were weak enough that the hunters were able to start picking them off, turning the pieces into ash. Eventually they'd whittled it down to just one more, what seemed like the main head, a fragment of Destroyah with a sparking horn that had once been near the top of the creature's full body. It charged through a spew of magma right at Atamala and pierced Goji through the skull. The molten Titaemon suddenly stopped all its movement. But then it swung its tail around, shoved it between itself and the crab, and flung the beast off of it, pulling the horn out of its head. Two hunters leapt into the crab's path and each swung their blades through it, finally disintegrating the last piece of the Crimson Demon. Destroyah was gone, and they were all just left, frozen in a standoff. Atama Legoji was still there, just waiting. Many of the hunters on board were dead or wounded. They thought they could likely still kill this demon, but they waited to see if it made a move. Eventually, it did take a step, but not in the direction of any hunter. It lurched its way to the edge of the ship, then simply fell off the side into the ocean, sinking away into the depths. For decades, nobody would hear from Atama Legoji again, though it was always suspected that the Coalition may need to eventually slay it. For the time being, though, the remaining hunters simply returned to Infant Island, picking up the no longer deal-bound Dr. Sarazawa and Emiko, and returning to their respective homes, ready to fight another day.
If you enjoyed this, you may like many of my different demon videos, but specifically perhaps the Ben 10 Aliens as Demons episode. It's the same kind of one long story sort of format, which my demon episodes aren't usually. Or you might like any of my different Godzilla videos. I'll link that whole playlist, turning Pokemon into Godzilla monsters, turning Godzilla monsters into dragons, which we're getting a 4th episode of next Friday, and I'm particularly excited about it because it's also kind of a collab with a bunch of other story and Speedpaint style art channels. And once again, I'm cameoing in all of their videos. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is me paraphrasing something I've heard a bunch of times from a man named Dr. Wayne Dyer, who uses the analogy that when you squeeze an orange, the only kind of juice you're ever gonna get from it is orange juice. In the same sense, when life squeezes you or squeezes and puts pressure on any person, the thing that's going to come out of you is whatever's in you. So if you're a very angry person, when life pressures you, anger is going to come out of you. But the difference between people and oranges is you can practice in the times when there isn't as much pressure on you to try and become a more compassionate, kind, and loving person, so that when life does squeeze you, that is more naturally what comes out of you, and you don't respond in a way that damages yourself or the people around you. For me personally, meditation has been fantastic help for that. I've started every day with a meditation for almost 3 years now, but there are tons of other different tactics as well. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next video on Monday.